I'd had it easy thus far, despite what it may have felt like. I sat atop an old rickety garden shed, hidden behind a dead tree beside it, as I glanced over at the threshing mill, past the small wall. In days gone by, the low and long building must have been a local business to be so close to these houses. Built mostly from wood, it had been repaired by hastily bolted-on beams and sheets of rusty metal by the slaves over the past few years. As such, it bore a very patchwork appearance, oddly traditional next to the industrial nightmare surrounding it from Philadelphia. I imagine this must be a pre-war building in the sense of existing long before the first shot of the first skirmish was fired at all. Thick lines of slaves were being let in and out. Good. I had to go through it to reach my destination. From the helter-skelter, I had seen masses of guard walkways between larger factories and warehouses around the entire area. Comparatively, going through the threshing mill would be safer, if only in a sense of having cover should I be spotted as opposed to a large open area watched by scoped rifles. I sat on my haunches, tapping a hoof on the shed as I contemplated my next move. All that time, I was still trying to fight off the slave in my mind. It taunted me, chided me, screamed that this was wrong, and urged me to turn around, go back to my master, go back to the predictable life where I knew my place. Sacred goddesses, what was I doing here? Trying to escape? I was about to run under their guns in some suicidal urge to try and save my own life. That wasn't for me to decide. I fought the tears, my head lowering. As I did so, my eyes found the pitbuck, strung to my right foreleg tightly still. I'd wanted it visible. I needed it visible. The stable dweller's inspiration was all that was keeping me going. She had escaped this place to evade death, so I could do the same. This reminder of her strapped to my leg was the symbol. She had one as a cutie mark. Now I knew why. Some pony had proven it could be done. Mentally bucking myself back to reality, I placed myself closer to the roof, hunkering down on all four legs as I crept to the edge. I almost squeaked as I looked over and saw a row of slaves by the street not 12 feet from me that I'd almost missed. Trudging and weary, they were all of a smaller stature. As I watched their despondent faces dragging hooves like iron weights and scarred sides from the thresher machine, I began to think. Perhaps I could sneak among them. I could hide in plain sight. Time was short. Drawing my saddlebag off, I began to wind some spare cloth around my pitbuck. It was a dead giveaway if unhidden. The rest could pass around the dirty slaves, I hoped, but I swung my knife around to the inside of my leg instead to keep it better hidden. Checking the bandages on my legs if they were tight, I dropped with a soft "wood" from the garden shed. I never was one for landings. It was perhaps a good thing I couldn't fly. And waited for the slavers guarding the procession to look away. With practiced, depressive steps, I silently trotted into line, fighting down the chains binding my mind from tempting me to fall back into actually being a slave. A filthy green mare looked sideways at me as I gently shoved my way to the middle of the slave march. I tried to smile back, receiving only a scowl in return. I put my head down, glancing only briefly as I heard a little flutter from nearby, probably an old piece of cloth in the wind. Every muscle twinged. Guards were looking at me, scanning the crowd from above and beside. Whips cracked, urging the smaller slaves into the mill's cavernous doorways after passing through the fence gates. Feeling myself being bumped from side to side by the thinning space for so many ponies to squeeze through, my concentration was entirely on staying on my hooves to keep moving like an average slave and not to draw any attention. Like your average slave, I thought. Looking around me, I saw ponies shuddering, crying, and fearfully looking around. I hated my fellow slaves. They would kill me as soon as look at me if they knew about my wings. But seeing them on the night of my hopeful flight from Philadelphia, I began to feel a sadness for them that was entirely new. I'd get out of here, but these ponies were to be left to work, hurt, and die with no change brought by my leaving. There was to be no escape for them. Normality would drive them to their deaths, whether sharp and painful, or slow and lingering. With practiced and weary steps, they made their way to the threshing machine. It still ran full tilt, the last shift only having just vacated. Even from the crowd, I could see the stains on the floor, red marks of long past, and the recently dried ones of the pony who had unexpectedly saved my life. I had to stop, the trembling of a close shave with death still passing through me whenever I thought on it, giving me pause to lean against a wall for a moment. Death from Philadelphia was without favoritism. What if it had picked me for a random and messy end? What if it picked the mayor? What if I returned with a team to liberate them all, and I found that she had been killed by some drunken slaver for no reason at all? Drop the saddlebag, slave. I blinked my eyes open, gasping in shock as I turned me head slowly. Painful inevitability reared its ugly head as I gradually focused on the sight of a dark red and black-clad unicorn mare staring down at me. A cane hovered in her telekinesis magic field as her eyes inclined towards a storage locker. You won't be able to move without getting caught with that thing on. Dump it in the room. You can pick it up later once you're done. Her colleague, an earth pony buck with an entirely shaved mane, moved up beside me. We'll keep it safe for you. Honest. We only take 10% of your caps. Other slavers go for higher amounts. Best deal. They had to be kidding me. Really? Come on, get ready. Take your place. Dump those clothes and those ridiculous goggles, too. Far too bulky to work under the thresher. Well, come on! Not good. Not good. Not good at all. I had hoped that I could slip right into the threshing line and make a dash for the back door the corpse had been taken to earlier. Since when did slavers start to care about safety? I glanced back and forth at the pair, searching for the words. I can't. See, this stuff is for Wicked Slit. Good. That bitch killed 2 of the slaves we lent her last week. Do you know how hard it is to find unicorns who can pick locks in this damned wasteland? Come on, give us the stuff. You can just tell her you got mugged. Somehow I doubted that would work, even if I wasn't lying through my teeth. This plan wasn't working. I had pictured me perhaps having to run under gunfire, overcoming fear to charge out into a free life. But this was just stupid. Come on, hurry up and drop the goods, slave. Please, I'll be fine. I practically begged them, lowering my head. I'll take the risk with it on. If I could just get past them, then I could slip out. Other slaves were beginning to pay attention to this, some slavers casting eyes from outside the doorway into the threshing room as well. Oh, for Luna's sake! Bearhoof, just take it from him. Slaves shouldn't have bags anyway. I felt the earth pony grab hold of my saddlebag strap with his teeth from the side. Struggling, he smacked me with a hoof a couple of times as I tried to shake him off in a blind panic. Terror struck me. What if he'd pulled my vest off? I'd gotten lucky earlier. The buck shouted through clenched teeth. I kept moving from side to side, grabbing onto my saddlebag however I could, a fight to keep it on me quickly becoming a scuffle that almost ended the moment I felt his hoof attempt to beat me on my side to keep me still. A metallic clang rung through the room as he pulled back, more surprised than genuinely hurt as his hoof impacted on the metal plate I had hidden there. What the hell? Grab him! If I'd moved faster, that would have been my chance, but a momentary pause to check my fleece hadn't shifted gave Bearhoof an opportunity to grab me again. I felt his front hooves wrap around my torso as he launched at me. His weight pulled me to the floor with a crash. I could smell his warm breath just above my head and feel every bit of his weight pressing down across my back. The pressure on my wings gave way to a pathetic squeal of pain. The continued rubbing as he shifted, trying to pin me down with his weight, was like being rubbed against a grindstone to my wings. The unicorn wandered over. She would cut off my only route in a second. The slaves had parted to stay away from the confrontation. No slave wanted to be near an angry slaver like I'd just done. Good. Now just stay still like an obedient little slave while we get all this off you. Thankfully, through my pain and fear, I remembered one way to get a buck off me. I struggled up just far enough to lift my back right hoof and fire it backwards as hard as I could. My hooves were tiny, small enough to fit right into that gap, with all the force focused onto one little point. On the crunch of contact, Bearhoof's weight entirely disappeared as his strangled cry pierced the air, hurting my ears from the proximity. I couldn't hesitate. I needed every bit of my supplies, and any delay would give time for the alarm to be raised once the master realized I'd made a run for it. Even as Bearhoof fell sideways, clutching his loins with both front hooves and crying in pain, the unicorn and the other slavers looked almost too stunned. One was laughing to react to their comrade's plight. Using the space, I turned and galloped as fast as I could into the mass of slaves around the machine. Behind me, the shouts quickly went out, calls to stop, and threats of punishment. I didn't stop. Panic and fear wouldn't let me. I'd already gone past the point of no return now. I'd attacked a slaver and went on the run. I had no illusions about what would happen if I were caught now. I needed to get out of here, lie low, and then move on. Slaves dove to either side of the thin corridor between the wall and the threshing machine edge as I weaved between them. The slavers were in hot pursuit, shoving slaves brutally away as they levitated batons, knives, and whips. They were faster than me, and unfortunately, I only had a straight corridor for the huge machine to run down. They were catching up, diving and grasping at me. Beside me, the whirling blades of the thresher continued their work even as every pony stood watching the chase. Wait. I felt a slaver right behind me, and heard the swish of a cane. In a moment, I ducked, rolling sideways away from the cane to be under the machine once again, and began to duck and shuffle for all I was worth to get away from them. I had around 15 seconds to use. I crawled forward, trying to get beyond a big mass of slaves nearby before the blades came back. Leftover refuse and thread built up around me as I moved in the confined space, rubbing the string above me from the saddlebag. The strands got in my mouth, eyes, and nose. I could see the slavers struggling to get past all the slaves standing at the ready line. That would slow them down. It would take them some time to force their way through the slaves in the thin gap between the machine and wall. But I could circumvent it under the machine. Ha! Who said being small was... Two hooves stretched out, grabbing my back leg. A slaver had crawled under the machine itself to get me. Too big to properly fit, a maniacal grin covered his face as I tried to kick at him. Up at the top, the blades reversed, hurtling back towards us. The slavers didn't know how short a time it was under here. "Let go!" I screamed madly, sweating and whinnying in panic as I saw the blades coming. He didn't even see them, just holding onto my hoof like grim death until his comrades arrived. I bucked, kicked, and thrashed wildly as I felt myself being pulled back further into the machine. It looked so close. My own dive, and the slaver grabbing me must have only been a few seconds. How long did I have? The battle to free my hoof caused him to try and pull me harder. His head and hooves and my back leg were becoming tangled in the thread from above. Rule number 1 of the thresher was don't get caught in the thread. I squealed, trying to free myself, even as the slaver began to realize his predicament. Even if I got free, there wasn't enough time to... No! I leaned in, swinging my pitbuck as hard as I could at his head. The connection shook the bandages free as the slaver reeled from the hard metal impact. I apologized under my breath to Sundial, even as I felt my hoof freed from his grasp. Not that it helped. The pair of us were still stuck in the thread like a spider's web. The machine was being slowed by the tangled thread, but the blades kept advancing slowly, sorting the thread back properly. If they reached us, then we'd be sorted with it! The slaver was starting to panic himself, thrashing all around and making his predicament even worse while I struggled to pull my hoof free from the winding thread. I felt tears on my face, my limbs shaking as the thum, 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 thum sound of the blades came ever nearer. Forget how handy it was. I would have given a lot to not have hearing that picked up sounds in so much detail right now. I didn't know what the other slavers were doing. Watching, probably. Would they be trying to stop the machine? Would they leap in to try and cut their fellow slaver free? Wait, cut free! My knife! Twisting, I dragged the hidden blade from the inside of my leg free with my mouth. Not wasting any time, I tried to saw through the toughly strung thread, the bouncing and movement making it exceptionally difficult, even as the machine's noise grew and grew. Thum, 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 thum! Come on, come on! A few bits of string popped free, but it was wound tight around my hoof. Thum, 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 thum. Nothing else for it. I dug the knife under the string on my hoof, yelping in pain as the desperate move let the blade cut me as I forced it down to cut the whole section of thread off. It was all I could do to not drop the knife before I fell backwards with a sudden jolt. Free! I turned, scrambling harder than ever before to escape. Rolling was impossible from the size of my saddlebag for anything more than a dive. I wasn't sure if I'd have the time, but I needn't have worried. The slaver, yelling to the others, did have to. I would try long and hard for some time to attempt to forget the sound the slaver made as he was sorted by the machine. Both his voice and the sickening sounds of a pony being caught up fully in the industrial-scale machinery assaulted every inch of innocence I liked to think I still had. I didn't look back for fear of freezing in horror, only taking advantage of the sickened slaves and slavers who could see to get a few seconds' head start. I saw one slave throw up on the spot. Another had gone pale, while one was actually smiling. I wondered what that slaver had done to her. I paused only for a second to check my hoof. The cut wasn't so bad, just a shallow nick to get under the thread. Nothing to worry about. I threw my weight into the slaves as I fought to get away before the slavers regained their senses from the horror show and chased me again.
He's getting away! Get that little murderer!
Okay, maybe not so much of a head start. I ran down the linear pathway, the double doors to the back rooms before me promising hiding places and safety. They burst open. 2 slavers came running through them, hearing the commotion. One of them had a pistol. I screeched to halt right in front of them, immediately looking for somewhere else. I needed to move. I turned and ran along the side of the machine, up the stairs onto the walkway the slavers used above it. Behind me, the 2 new slavers finally gathered what was happening and gave pursuit. My hooves clattered on the metal as I passed above the thresher. At the far end was another stairway leading to the roof. Below me, I could see slavers running for the stairs at the entrance again to cut me off. A sharp, sudden roar of automatic gunfire erupted from behind me. Sparks flew from the catwalk as the slaver unloaded his mouth-borne automatic pistol after me. The sound made me scream as I kept running, seeing holes ripped around the metal. He had missed. I presumed the slavers often didn't get a chance to try out their weapons in this place. Even I could see the recoil had caught him by surprise. I heard him swearing as he reloaded. Slaves were screaming, diving to the ground while the slavers ran to the catwalk after me. Pushing my little stride to its limit, I galloped for all I was worth, trying to outrun the ponies below before they got to the other side. I realized I was still whimpering, more scared of being caught than determined to actually escape. The entire catwalk shook with the 4 or 5 slavers rushing after me. The imagery of it collapsing into the whirling machinery below scared me enough to increase my rate as much as I could. Funny, I hadn't ever seen that the entire machine was mirrored on the other side of the hall, too. Another row of slaves had stopped to gaze upward at the scene. The slavers pulled ahead on the ground. I wasn't going to make it! Briefly I heard the sound of a pistol being pulled and prepared to fire. I hit the ground hard, that awful roar of rapid gunshots filling the air as rounds sprayed over my head. The deadly whiz past my ears almost led me to think I'd been hit before I saw the burst had struck a supporting girder on the roof. Along with the massive weight and thumping hooves, I felt the entire structure tremble. Then it began to lurch and tilt. Oh, not good. The slavers down below stopped, unwilling to run on to the slowly twisting and shuddering walkway after witnessing what had happened to their friend before. Galloping at an angle, I ran to the second stairs, diving for them just as I felt the entire walkway collapse beneath me. A shriek of tortured metal bit through the air as the entire construction bent and tore from the roof, the long walkway bending to the side and landing atop the sensitive machinery. Screams and swearing sounded behind me as the slavers tumbled down it, landing amongst the threads as the blades shattered and shuddered to a stop. Slaves ran in every direction as blades of metal flew from the ancient machine as the edges bit into the walkway, and then themselves flew off. The noise was absolute, crashing mixing with screams, the thunk of metal embedding in walls, crossed with the twanging of thousands of pieces of string at once being severed. I heard the slavers cry to get outside and surround the building. Another shouted to go and fetch the griffins to bring me down. One bellowed to watch for me leaping off the building. Emerging onto the roof, slanted and covered in disjointed slates. I ran away from the hole as fast as I could before...
There!
Once again, I heard the howl of that fiendishly quick-firing pistol. Bullet holes punched through the roof I had just thrown myself away from, one tearing close enough to glance off my side. The heavy steel plate I'd shoved in there withstood it, but the impact alone knocked me from my hooves. Tumbling toward the edge, I cried out as I slammed my hooves on the roof, only stopping as they caught the downed power cord resting over the building. Come on, Murky! Panting to myself, I fought to keep myself balanced across the roof. I could hear slavers rushing out into the yard, surrounding it, shouting to the guard towers behind me at the entrance. I ducked behind a set of chimneys, hidden among them from any snipers. I needed a hiding spot, but they knew I was up here. How long till Griffins arrived? I couldn't stop shaking. I was scared. Oh, so scared. No, terrified. They were hunting for me, all alone with no pony to help me. I wish number 6 were here, or the stable dweller. They could tell me where to go, what to do. They'd find some daring thing to jump into. Enlightened by the idea, I stuck my head out. Slavers hadn't come to this side yet over the diagonal roof. At the same time, sickening horror and a life-saving idea came to mind as I looked down. Below me was a mass grave, dozens of ponies, dumped in death into the old waste pit. I could even see the slave from earlier splayed across the top, the most recent corpse. Surely the slavers wouldn't spot one more addition to the pile, right? My mind rebelled. Of all things I'd hidden in, this was too far. I'd taken refuge in pigsties, rotten food cupboards, spider-infested holes, drainage ducts, and musky cellars, but this was too much. I couldn't.
Got word from Stern. She's sending a wing over to locate him.
I had to. This had gone too wrong already. I'd been spotted and called out as an escaping slave. I didn't have time to hang around and try for a different way. I needed to move my plan along before word got to the wall. If they found out... I steadied myself on my hooves and clenched my teeth. This wasn't going to be pleasant at all. Oh, how I longed for my pigsty again. With a short canter, I dove from the roof. It was only a single story high, but to a small pony like me, it felt so much higher as I tumbled hooves first towards the mass grave. With a hard thud, I landed heavily. The air knocked right out of me as all 4 hooves protested at the jarring impact. My cuts stung badly at the exertion as I tried to get up. All the time, I tried not to think about what I had landed on. It was impossible. They squelched under me. A rotten stink threatened to make me vomit. Flies buzzed around my head. I had stains on me. Suddenly, I was very glad for my stolen pair of goggles. Their eyes stared with lidless purpose, their poses unnatural, and I could swear I recognized a couple. He must have leapt off where we couldn't see. Come on! My ears twitched as I heard the shout over the screams of slavers keeping control of the terrified slaves. Looking down, I immediately regretted this idea. The mare below me had been burned to death somehow. I could see her teeth had been removed. Why would they even need them? But she was to be my temporary savior. Muttering apologies through a mouth I dared not open very far, I knelt down, fighting the churning of my stomach as I pulled myself under a couple of the bodies and fought the urge to move as something dripped on my goggles. I needed to stop shaking. They came around the corner, 5 slavers, including the one with the auto pistol. They galloped over. I could see them looking up at the roof, turned away from me. Could I have just slipped out in that time?
He must have jumped. Are you kidding? Kid was terrified. He'd never get that far.
Well, he's not here now.
Shut up, both of you. He's gone, all right? So where?
They turned, spreading out. Some wandered to the broken fence posts. I had considered running through them, but I'd never get away from the slavers in a straight race. I needed to misdirect them first. The buck with the auto pistol in his mouth wandered closer, his hooves coming near the mass grave's edge. He glanced over it, before turning to his comrades, spitting the pistol out. I could see it hung from his neck on a cord. "Hey, didn't a mare and stallion try to hide in the grave a few weeks back?" Every effort it took not to move was strenuous, to not throw up my hooves and beg them not to shoot. By Luna, they'd shot at me! At me! The weight of that was just sinking in. I'd been beaten and attacked brutally before, but a gun was a whole new level. If I'd been a few more inches to the right when that bullet struck, I would have been down. "Yeah, just give it a spray and come on. The Griffins will find him." Damn, Red Eye isn't going to be happy about that machine. The buck turned, taking the pistol back in his mouth and pointing it seemingly right at my face. I closed my eyes before praying that he didn't see that slight movement. I was only one of many. He might miss me. He might miss me. I saw the barrel of the pistol blaze in fire as that short but intense roar blasted out of it, being swung back and forth across the grave. I felt corpses move, kick up, shudder, and jerk under the barrage. For a second or two, it felt like they had all come to life again, clambering and grabbing, pulling me deeper into them. I began to slip downwards as the bullets disturbed the awkward balance of the grave's contents. I squeaked. I couldn't help it. But as I opened my eyes, I saw the slavers wandering off. I felt every muscle release from the self-induced rigor mortis I'd been in out of sheer terror. The echo of the weapon still rung in my ears as I mentally checked everything. The moment they were gone, I pulled myself free and galloped without a care for noise. It wasn't until I was past the fence and running into the outer edges of the slaver camps that I finally stopped behind a ruined sky wagon and began to clean my goggles and fleece with some spare rags. I stopped only as my stomach twisted. Reality caught up to me, and I realized what I had done. I spent the next 10 minutes getting rid of everything I had eaten lately at all before collapsing in a shuddering heap inside the sky wagon. Ahead of me lay the end run. Behind me, I could hear slavers and griffins searching for me. I'd thought being shot at was the point of no return. I was wrong. This was it. If I moved past here, I would cease to be a slave attempting to get away from a guard trying to harm them, and become a slave trying to escape entirely. There would be no warnings, no punishments, no pit, and no hope if caught. Punishment for going into the slaver camps around the edge of the wall was immediate death, or painful death, depending on the mood of the guard who caught you. I was stuck. Fear had taken me at every joint and muscle against moving further. The slave in my mind was begging with me, bringing thoughts of other ways to survive. Perhaps I could find enough things to convince Artery to heal me instead to live. What if I stole things to survive and just hide? I fought them down. I knew they weren't possible. Not truly. Besides, I needed to get out to draw the picture for the mare as well. It was a tiny reason, more an excuse to tell myself to go. But it did the job. I took the step, one hoof over the border, before galloping toward the most dense concentration of tents and shacks I could see. Any cover would be needed. Guard posts and rings of red-eyed soldiers around the campfires were situated everywhere. It was a true shanty town of tight spaces and thin alleyways between encampments. I'd told myself to dare a lot, but this felt like a truly daring endeavor. I just hoped it would end with the same victory the stable dweller had. One thing I quickly realized was lots of cover also meant lots of places to run into guards without meaning to. I quickly trotted backwards before slipping inside the shack, listening carefully as a huge, battle-saddle-laden earth pony clomped past. Breathing a sigh of relief, I quickly turned to check the shack, only to very quickly begin making my way back out as I spotted 4 soldiers sleeping on makeshift bunk beds clearly taken from an old barrack somewhere in the city. I was sweating profusely, not just from exertion, not just from fear, but the heat reflected inwards off the massive wall nearby noticeably made things worse under my heavy fleece. Trotting the way the guard had come, I stuck close to the walls, trying to convince myself everything was fine. The stable dweller had done this from the pit, right? She'd been spotted right away. I'd gotten to the camps without a single pony following me. Did that mean I was doing better? Remembering the iconic waves of magic swirling about her as she had ascended, I quickly put my ego back in its place. She hadn't needed to sneak. Ducking low, I stuck behind a shack's corrugated metal fence. I could hear guards muttering to one another on the other side as I moved hoof by hoof past them. Asphalt and hard rock made silence difficult as my hooves touched ground, dropping my speed to a painful crawl. Briefly, I realized that I should have made pads for my hooves from the rags too. Above me, a guard tower watched the area, although I couldn't see the sniper within it from this angle. Those towers were making life hell. I stuck to the edge of the fence, carefully watching it for any moo. The tip of a barrel glinted. As fast as I dared, I skipped to the other side of the narrow lane, hiding against the back of a tent to stay out of the line of sight. My breath was sharp and quick as I tried not to fall into the tent itself from my hasty movement. Moving on, shack to shack, fence post to tent, I gradually moved my way through the thick camps. Racks of weapons attracted my attention, but all were exposed, and, honestly, I had no idea how to use them with my mouth properly anyway. Ducking behind a flaming barrel, I watched a soldier wander past wearing a mid-range battle saddle that bore double shotguns. I fought down the sting of jealousy. I really wanted one of those things. The way the mechanics worked, the angle of the springs and tiny gears into such a tiny package, the precision weights, the guidance of the saddle itself to allow it all to sit properly when recoiling. If only for the amazing content, I wanted to steal it from his back. The fact that it looked like it could turn me into a fine mist was all that stopped me from wanting to somehow find a way. That battle saddle was gorgeous. I knew nothing of how to actually repair or understand the mathematics behind it. I just appreciated them and their artistic beauty of design. Behind me I heard the stomping of some pony as they got up from their fire. Even in the heat, I shivered. They had to be coming this way. I had to move now or I'd be spotted. As quietly as I could, I was forced to follow the soldier with the battle saddle, creeping right behind him. I simply hoped that he would pass a turning before the one behind me turned the corner. Mere seconds before he did, I found the space to hop between two tents and crawl behind them. The tents had their back to a fence, but with a little light hoofing the ground, I dug a hole just deep enough to allow my small size to squeeze under it, pushing my saddlebag before me. I emerged inside a tent I hadn't even known was so close to the other side. With no flooring, I clambered up without obstacle, taking it inch by painstaking inch, as I saw 2 bucks were sleeping at the side with their weapons leaning nearby. I froze as one shifted, hooves rubbing his eye. Carefully, I tried to move before he woke up. With a stretch, he dumped himself right back down, still fully asleep.
Oh, Luna, you naughty princess.
I wasn't sure whether I wanted to laugh or roll my eyes. Many ponies of the wasteland didn't believe in the goddesses anymore, even if they still swore by them. But I'd been brought up by a mother who knew better. Edging around the tent flap, I noticed it opened into a large communal area with a roaring fire at the center. Guards surrounded it, passing plates of unidentifiable meat between one another from a grill plate over the flames. Sitting on logs, they all stared into the fire, or at one another as they conversed loudly. At least 4 or 5 conversations going on all at once. I could sneak by this. I'd done harder things before in quieter areas. It may have been loud, but it was about to get much louder. It started slow, but with the inevitable volume carried within its wailing drone, the Philadelphia balefire warning siren began its deathly, eerie klaxon scream. Growing in volume second by second, it roared into the Philadelphia sky, raising hairs on every pony's backs for miles. Even now, 200 years on, the sound struck absolute terror in many, me especially. Louder and louder, my ears began to hurt as every guard in the area shot to their hooves. The clattering of weapons, rush of action, and screams for what was going on filled the air. I felt rooted to the spot as the sound seemed to penetrate my entire body. Images of skeletons in dead homes, of balefire wreathing through cities, of a world ending and the goodness of Equestria being burned out from an unstoppable and indiscriminative wave. Back then, it had signaled the end of the world. Today, it was the call to arms against attack, or for escaping slaves. The master had alerted them. The Thresher slaves would have confirmed the direction. My head start was over. They were coming for me. I took off. Stealth was pointless now. Guards would be searching everything with enough determination born of the screaming siren's incentive. Above me, waves of griffins took to the sky, and every guard tower lit their magical energy bulbs to shine red glares upon the area near the wall. Galloping at top speed, I sped past the guards, not caring if I was spotted. I no longer had the time to worry for that. If I didn't get through the wall before the guards atop it were settled, I'd never get 100 feet from the borders of Philadelphia.
He's right here! Open fire!
Booming retorts of rifles followed by the staccato clattering of automatic weaponry sounded in my wake, stopped only by the massive cover in the shantytown the guards lived in. Diving around a corner, I rolled as best I could to come to my hooves sideways, and rushed for any small hole I could find. Sneaking was gone, but I could still evade. The wailing in the air and the screaming of the guards was too much commotion for me to even think about fear as I wriggled between shacks and jumped tie lines from tents. I spilled a crate of rifles as I crashed into it, before screaming and running inside a tent as soldiers piled into the clearing. Drawing my knife, I cut through the back of it as fast as I could, a hole so small only I could fit through. Behind me, a heavily sleeping mare was cut down by incoming rounds as they attempted to hit me through the tent's canvas. How many times had I run from gunfire? How many sniper shots rang out as they caught a tiny glimpse of me between buildings? How many times was I screamed at to stop? I kept going. To stop was death. To keep going was survival. Escape! I burst from the edge of the camp, collapsing and staggering to my hooves. Gunfire pocketed the mud around me as I weaved, dodged, and ran for all my worth.
Fucking hit him! You seen how small he is?
Guards were pouring from the camp. Sweet Celestia, how many were there? The ground was open in front of me, all the way to the wall. A kill zone. A giant kill zone. My memory flashed back as a booming speaker of Red-Eye's voice opened up, demanding the rogue slave to halt immediately. Standing in the road, Number 6 bellowing for me to follow, stopping scared in the wake of gunfire and the demands of my master. No, he was not my master. Not any more! I screamed an incoherent cry, charging forward! I could see a drain at the bottom of the wall, just like I had imagined. Gunshots fell around me, pinging from rocks and churning up mud. If I could just reach that drain, I'd be safe until the other side. I didn't stop once, running from side to side and galloping until my hooves were in agony from striking rocks. The sunset passed behind the wall as I chased it, determined to view it on the other side, find out where the stable dweller had gone over the horizon. I mounted the rocks, diving off them even as a rocket-propelled grenade blasted them into shrapnel. My rump stung as pieces flew into me, but I was too determined to stop now. To either side I saw guards running for me, but even I could tell they were too far away to catch me in time. A smile crossed my face. I dodged left and right confidently, knowing all along that I had been meant to do this. Their gunfire missed me completely. Their attempts to hit a fast-moving and small target camouflaged against a night's darkness were met with failure so long as I didn't run in a straight line. Tracer fire struck the wall. Shouts for bringing me down went out. Above me I heard a flutter in the sky. Like a glass pane shattering, realization struck me. Hearing it once was random. Time seemed to slow. Hearing it twice was coincidence. Terror began to clench my stomach as I began to turn my head to look upwards. 3 times was a definite sign I had been followed the entire time. I saw the jet-black griffin with the long-barreled rifle hovering in the air. I tried to bend my legs, to dive out of the way, into the drain, until she fired. It struck me mid-leap. the force of a sledgehammer slapping into my side. I felt the hot pain of the bullet crash through my torso and rip its way out of the other side, my armor plating completely failing to even so much as delay it. I fell, tumbling in the air in a slow arc before landing in a heap. All the gunfire ceased as I went down and briefly blacked out from the overwhelming force of immediate agony. Immediately, consciousness flowed back and brought with it a world of pain I had never once imagined could exist. I screamed, loud, rasping, and full of hurt. I clasped my hooves to my side. I couldn't even remember if that was the entry or exit. Both sides burned with painful heat. I forgot my escape. I forgot the sunset and my freedom. All that was in my mind was panic, pain, and fear of dying ever so suddenly, as reality shattered my imaginative fantasy. Thrashing in the dirt, my eyes clenched shut, I wailed for any pony, some pony to come and help me, to save me. I cried for number 6. I cried for the stable dweller, and hell, even Celestia herself to help me. My legs had gone numb. Forcing my eyes open, I almost fainted on the spot as I witnessed the pool of blood spreading from beneath me. Beside me, tauntingly, the drainage ditch sat, its murky number 7-sized hole forever to tease me with untouched potential. Oblivious to my pain and crying, the griffin landed beside me as the guards moved in, weapons pointed. Ragini! That was her name. The griffin from yesterday. Whimpering and moaning loudly, I looked up at her, my tears mixing with the mud and blood on the ground as I raised a single hoof toward her, begging for help, to not be killed on the spot. She batted it away with her muzzle, before reaching down, her talons pulling my fleece up to examine the wound. I screamed as the wound was aggravated, and as she began to yank my clothing away. No! Please! Don't! You'll kill me! I need to get out! I need to... My words went unheard as she pulled it up. I cried out anew as I saw the injury myself. The exit wound caked in red. Whimpering, I looked away and shuddered. My limbs shook. I was going into shock. The guards broke their calm as they and Regini saw what lurked beneath my fleece. "A Pegasus," she said quietly, and full of immediate hate. Well, the rumors are true, then. I couldn't respond. I just tried to keep my blood in, trying to hold down on my wound. Even the pain of my own hooves touching it gave way to more pain and shouting from the feeling. Ragini! Please! I'm sorry. Let me live. Please! Ragini shook her head and drew the rifle, the barrel aiming directly to my head. Escaping slaves only get one thing. Her eyebrow twitched. I couldn't hear anything over the sound of all the guards catching up. They shouted and demanded information. Ragini looked up sharply, away to the side as though hearing or spotting something. She hesitated before removing the weapon. Guards, take him in. And no, I'll be informing Stern of your failure to stop a slave for this distance. It's embarrassing. I followed him all the way from the fun farm, watched him outwit you all. Get him out of here. I cried and curled up around my wound, feeling my head get overwhelmed by dizziness. My speech felt slurred as I shouted for help. Colors washed into one another, and I felt like I were seconds behind my own body's actions. Shock overwhelmed me, drove me to feeling faint, yet I saw the upset soldiers and guards from Ragini's proclamation rush forward. They had revenge in their eyes, and I held my hooves up as they swarmed over me, tugging my wounded body amongst them. Hooves struck me, rifles knocked into me. The assault began, one I knew I'd never survive. But as quickly as it started, it stopped, as I witnessed the guards cease and part. My burning throat gave way to a horrible croaking as I struggled to open my one functioning eye from the swelling that had blinded the other one again. The last thing I saw was a figure advancing through the crowd, red and black. A single, baleful, glowing crimson light emerged from one eye socket. Before I could even utter the word, "Master," to beg for forgiveness, My hoof stretched out to him. I fell into the black void that awaited me, and felt no more.
Now listen, children. DJ Palm 3's gonna have to get serious for a moment. No, really. Yeah, I know it ain't something that we like to do all too often, but I've been telling you all about this stuff for the entire day. But I've been thinking, and it feels only truthful that I mention something. You will fail. Now, don't treat that how it sounds. What I truly mean is, no pony can expect to go out there and make it all happen on their first try. The wasteland didn't last 200 years just because a few ponies were lazy. Oh, no. To fight the good fight, we need to learn not only to stand up and try, but to know how to get back up when we're beaten. To learn from it, get stronger, and try again. I'm sure all those legends we know of thought the same. Hell, a certain mare knows that more than most. So I implore you all, my little wastelanders, if you go out to fight the good fight I keep telling you to, there will be times it will hurt more than you can imagine. But don't give up. Don't ever give up. The moment we do, that's when Equestria dies. Bit of a downer note to end on, I know. But I care for you all out there. I wouldn't want to finish this day without letting you know the reality you'll be in for. Now back to something happier. This is Sweetie Belle with a song to send us all to sleep tonight peacefully. Hush now, Wasteland. One more painful day is over. This is DJ Palm 3 bringing you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts.
I wasn't dead. Even amongst the black abyss of pain and defeat, I could hear voices as I faded in and out. Some I knew, some I didn't recognize. They rang in my head, my ears picking them up from time to time. The pain flared and became worse. It threatened to overwhelm me. A sensation of drowning and fighting to stay afloat. I was lying on something hard, yet my balance felt like I was falling again and again. I felt some pony grab me, hooves around my body, lifting me up desperately. Lying on my back, I opened my eyes to see nothing but darkness and one mare staring down at me. Light orange hair streaked with red. I tried to speak, to reach out, but I just lay silent, unable to function in my own body. Every sound began murky and muddled, as though hearing from underwater. She spoke 5 words. I couldn't understand any of them. It looked like she was pleading. What did she say? She glowed with light, the brightness expanding before it contained my entire vision, and I woke. Hard metal and red haze greeted me as I awoke. I was lying on my side, distinctly not dead, but possessing a weariness that was hard to quantify to myself. Red smoke flowed from grills on the floor, searing my lungs and half-choking me. Whoever put me in here to recover clearly had little care about my ongoing health. I twisted, checking my side. Scar tissue remained, but hairs were growing back already. It hurt badly, and I felt weak, yet my lungs felt clearer, despite the smoke in the cramped cell. Whatever they had used to heal me had affected my disease as well. It still felt present, but toned down. In many ways I felt healthier than I had in years, recovering wounds notwithstanding. What was going on? I gave myself a once-over. I was chained to the floor, all 4 hooves shackled to colossal iron rings, welded to the sheet metal. All of my clothing had been stripped, fleece, saddlebag, and even my goggles. With pain I realized that along with everything else, I had lost my pit book and journal. All I had left was my own skin and cutie mark that all too harshly reminded me of where I had gone wrong. No, I hadn't gone wrong. It had been a wake-up call. I had failed, but somehow I had realized that it didn't matter. It didn't matter what they said, or what my cutie mark said. From the moment I had sallied forth under the scream of the siren, something had changed within me. I was a different pony now. Not a slave. Well, kinda. I was still a slave, but the crucial difference was I no longer wanted to be one. I may be scared and liable to being terrified back into line, but the crucial choice had been made. I was no longer controlled by my slave instinct, regardless of what had happened. And I still wanted out. I still wanted to try again. That was what mattered, no matter how harsh this got. Distantly, I heard the sound of hooves in the hallway outside the thick cell door. They grew closer, and I shrunk back as far as I could. An authoritative, well-spoken voice snapped a polite command. "Open it, please." Without a word or hesitation, the door hissed open, spraying steam from the complex mechanics and spraying the smoke in a whirlwind cloud. From within it strode a pony. Red and black, glowing crimson eye. I shrieked, trying to run backward before the chains caught and I collapsed on the ground. Once again I cried out as my wounds slapped the ground hard, before curling up and just shivering in the wake of him. Red Eye. "Do you know why you are still alive?" His voice was startlingly young, incredibly well-spoken and fluid. I shook my head. He was not my master, but this pony had the authority and ability to control a superpower in the wastes. "Then perhaps I should regale you of the manner in which you were spared, Murky number 7. He knew my name. He strode forward, clearing through the smoke with a calm pace. He was not Red Eye. Standing before me was not an earth pony, but now a properly revealed unicorn. Younger than Red Eye, yet older than myself by a few years. A charcoal black coat with a two-tone red mane, he wore a well-kept uniform that seemed to be half practical and half scholar, colored in a gray and dark red. His left eye housed an intricate-looking eyepiece, not cybernetics but a monocle of sorts of highly tuned technology that hung from one ear. It glowed much in the same way as Red Eye's bionic replacement in his right socket. I had missed the differences in my terror and the cloying smoke. He stood with the grace and poise of an educated pony as he looked down at me, yet somehow he didn't look down at me. His eyes, stared at me as though viewing an equal. Over the years, I more than any pony had learned the difference. "I saved your life, Murky number 7. He began, taking a breath and lowering his head slightly towards me. "I had heard there was a rumor of a Pegasus in Philadelphia, and when the escape siren sounded, well, who else would be most likely to try than a hated Pegasus? Naturally I was interested, and from what you did, I know I was right. You are indeed a very interesting pony." I glanced down at my sides. Those pitiful, useless wings sat without comment. "Now it may have cost me many favors, and I had to pull some strings to avoid you being shot on the spot for attempting to escape. So I do hope my investment shall prove worthwhile. You are something of an anomaly among the higher-ranked overseers. You know?" I shook my head again, but forced myself to lie against the wall, supporting my still healing wounds. The unicorn's horn lit with red magic, drawing a bowl of stew in from behind him to sit before me. It was warm. "They don't often encounter Pegasi, hence my interest in acquiring you here. Now, come, eat. You are severely malnourished, Murk." I sniffed it. Proper apple stew. I didn't wait, digging in before it was retracted. The unicorn patiently waited as I slurped it down. The first proper meal I'd had in over 2 months. The taste, the freshness, and, the warmth. I wasn't very dignified as I gulped every piece down. I even licked the bowl before sighing in relief as my stomach, for once, properly filled. He smiled, before calmly resuming. "Now, Murky number 7, I am sure you have questions." I felt given to talk. Thus far, any threat was being disarmed, but I could not prevent a wariness. Regardless of heartwarming food, he was still one of Red Eye's ponies. Who are you?" My voice sounded rough and weak next to his strong tone. He spoke politely, intelligently, yet there was no hint of the scholarly poshness that I had once heard in Manhattan when a librarian from Ten Pony Tower had come seeking a slave for keeping his library clean. I'm sure any pony could guess why I didn't last long in that job. The buck smiled, a thin and deceptively friendly-looking one. I kept my wits ready. That kind of smile often was not to be trusted. I knew. I had seen Red-Eye once use it. In fact, this buck was reminding me a lot of him in more than just image. My name is Protégé, a 4th-tier ranking work leader within Master Red-Eye's endeavors in Unity, Philadelphia, and beyond. I was trained, educated, and eventually handed responsibility by his teachings and ideologies. Although too old to have had the same upbringing as he affords foals, I have integrated myself to his plans rather fully in my time under his advice and guidance. So, I decided to dare speaking. This buck at least seemed willing to answer questions. Basically, you're his, next in line? His heir? I believe you mean heir, Murk. He smiled almost too smoothly as he spoke. And no, as much as I would appreciate the offer, I am not. Stern is his second-in-command. However, I have had the benefit of much contact with Master Red-Eye himself, including opportunities to be taught directly, one-to-one. Such times when I have sat with him and listened to his wisdom and teachings have been blessings. To hear of the great unity he intends, to hear it in his own words meant for my ears alone, he made me realize what we could accomplish to help this world. As such, some might regard me as his student, as he charts my progress from week to week, via reports if not in person. Protégé looked to the side, leaving me with only the slightly unsettling view of his eyepiece. Indeed, I consider myself lucky. Lucky to be trained to kill ponies like me? I couldn't conceal the question. Every ounce of me hated what he stood for. I had lived my life in slavery, and now this clearly intelligent buck considered himself lucky to be taught to make more of it? To kill you, Murk? Ponies like me! I shouted, still riding the high of knowing I had broken the slave in my mind for now. We're out there dying every day for this place! Murk, I assure you, I make no attempt to hide the casualty rates among the workers. He spoke with incredible diction, almost rehearsed. But you must understand that this is necessary. In 100 years, could Equestria survive when stored food runs out? When we have expended every piece of technology? No, we could not. Philadelphia, Master Red-Eye's great dream, is to build a new world for us before the chance to support it is lost forever. Murk! His eyes seemed to light with fire. He was passionate about this. Have you seen the foals? The fillies and colts? I shook my head. I hadn't seen any since I came to Philadelphia, a slight irony in itself. Exactly! Murk, Master Red-Eye keeps them safe from all this work, this toil that we all sacrifice to. Even myself is in efforts for their safety. He protects them, heals them, educates them, and trains them for when we, those fighting to save Equestria, eventually manage to build enough industry that this world may operate once again. He closed his eyes and sighed. I realize this is a tough world, Murk. Some workers may not be entirely willing, but for the good of Equestria, it is the only way. For what it is worth, I am sorry that ours, is the generation that must go through this. But for every mill, factory, and piece of technology we create, we bring us one step closer to our goal, to give our children a better world at the price of our own lives. Is that so evil? I listened. I heard, and yes, I was even slightly moved by his words. But a life of slavery? A whole life? I couldn't let go of what it had done to me. To hear that Philadelphia served a purpose other than simple greed and power was mind-boggling. Red-Eye had often spoke through the loudspeakers about such things, but I had never believed it was a serious intention until now. I couldn't quite grasp what to say for a few seconds. I don't know. Any reply fell away from me. I was not in a condition for an ideological debate. Well then, continued Protégé, perhaps I should move on to the next obvious topic. Yourself. I perked up, but remained silent. You tried to escape, Murk. He wandered from side to side, pacing as he spoke. However, it was, to be frank, a rather unthoughtful attempt for all your efforts. My subordinate Regini had you tagged the moment you left the fun farm, as I'm sure you know. However, I must point out that she actually saved your life.
She shot me!
And you, he continued without so much as a breath, were about to crawl into a drainage tunnel filled with tainted chemicals that would have killed you in moments in a rather distasteful way. Did you not read the sign? His voice dropped at that last sentence as I sighed and shook my head. I can't read. A pity. Lucky for you that your choice of armor was fairly uninformed. She shot me with an anti-machine rifle. What good would any armor do? Protégé almost seemed to grin. An anti-machine rifle, Murk. She shot you with a low-caliber rifle she keeps to fire without as much recoil in flight. If she had used an anti-machine rifle, I assure you, I would have been using a mop to bring you here rather than my magic. Somehow, I didn't find the joke funny. This entire conversation made me feel uncertain. I had thought myself free, then dead. Now, once again, in red-eye stocks in a prison cell. This was too much to take in at once. Really. Only Protégé's strange calmness and polite nature seemed to be holding even me together. Even so, I could not help but feel threatened. I had seen Red-Eye's cruelty, despite his silver tongue. Now I shan't go into your choice to take oatmeal, which goes off in a day, or the scrap, not worth more than 50 caps that weighed you down so much. Instead, I would rather denote that you owned some things of great interest that showed you were serious about escaping. I was. I tried to sound as stoic as I could. So I see. You want freedom badly, Murk. I can see it in your eyes, but I am going to tell you the reason why you failed more than any. That caught me by surprise. I lowered my eyebrows, trying to stand up. You failed, Murk, because you do not know what it is you want. What? But I did. Am dying. I have an irradiated and marginally tainted infection. Murk, I know. My personal physician detected it when he was healing you. He could not remove it. I only have so many resources to expend, and while he is capable, he is not a surgeon-level doctor. But that is precisely the point. You tried to escape because you wanted to live. I will tell you, Murk, escape from Philadelphia is not impossible. He had to be meaning the stable dweller. But hearing those words felt like a world-changing revelation to me. It had seemed so impossible, especially now that he had explained I really had stood no chance. But you must be willing to go beyond that, to try so hard that it goes past what we can possibly predict, to push so hard that nothing could ever hold you back. But you cannot harness that, not yet anyway. You sought to live, you ran in fear, but what you say you want is freedom. He lowered his eyebrows, looking almost saddened by the fact himself. How can you truly want freedom hard enough to escape this place, when you have no idea what freedom is yet? He was right. I had no idea what freedom entailed. I had never had it. No matter how much I said I had no master, I did. No real choice or will to do as I pleased. It seemed blindingly obvious now in retrospect. Yes, Murk, if you want to desire freedom enough to escape, then you will have to first taste freedom. I lowered my head, feeling a wave of depression seeping in. How would I ever know that? But thankfully for you, Murk, I am going to offer you your freedom. My eyes almost flew off my head in how wide they became. Joy catapulted in my mind, held back only by a wariness born of a life of disappointment. How? What I mean is that Master Red-Eye offers ways to earn your freedom. In this case, 2 years of service on special operations, such as exploring stables and other similar buildings. Now, Murk, I am a work leader who specializes in the workers who wish to attempt to find their freedom that way. Some seek only the violence it provides, while others truly seek to become free through service to the cause. I have signed you to it. What? I had known about it, Any slave could do it, but I didn't want that. It was dangerous. You had to kill stable dwellers if you found them. I couldn't do that. In greater service to Master Red-Eye, you are now under me. I am your new master, Murk. I hope you will show great enthusiasm. You are an interesting pony. Not just for your Pegasus wings, either. I do hope you attain your freedom. Truly, I do. He looked honest, but the thought of the dangers I would have to face for 2 years only echoed in my head. I had sought to escape. All I had found for myself was years of work in a harsher environment. No matter how polite or strangely nice this protege seemed. Now, Murk, I shall leave you to my assigned overseer, who will take you to the mall. 4 walls, a roof, and better meals than you have had. I am not a brutal leader, Murk. I only seek ponies who wish to serve Master Red-Eye and help us to create something beautiful for the children of Equestria. Please, take comfort in knowing I will only permit you on tasks that will truly help us. I am not given to wasting special resources in the ponies that I locate to work for me. I didn't know what to feel. I just stood as he turned and walked back outside. I heard a heavy pony approaching. From Protege's look, it was his overseer. Heavy clumps of hooves, and a large shadow mixed with a low, deep, and almost uninterested voice. Take him straight to the mall, get him cleaned up, and get him something to eat. Then, put him with the workers in the plaza. Try to keep him away from the raiders. Maybe put him in with Coral if she's back. Nothing else.
Right there, eh?
Protege hesitated, staring upwards, before warily leaving, and in his place walked him.
Hey there, cutie pie.
The master grinned wickedly as he passed his bulk through the thin doorway, backing me into the cell as he drew the key to my shackles. A deep rumbling and taunting laughter set my eyes to water once again as I huddled in the corner.
You and I are going to get along so well, little Murky.
Footnote: Perk attained. Runt of the litter. You were never the largest, subject to a series of beatings and bullying through your life. You gain a small damage resistance, bonus against non-critical unarmed attacks. Doesn't hurt any less, mind you. Footnote: Quest perk attained. Shadow Canter, rank 1. Whether for crime or survival, you have begun to show your ability to stick to the shadows whilst objects strangely go missing in your passing from both pockets and homes. You gain +10 to sneak, and any thefts you make are twice as likely to succeed.